Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending this month's webinar presented by Dr. Tony Williams, and it's entitled The New Alchemy, Online Networking, Data Sharing, and Research Activity Distribution Tools for Scientists. My name is Nicole Tulvey. I'm chair of the membership committee for the International Society of Exposure Science, and I will be moderating this webinar. For those of you who are not ISES members, please consider joining the Society as we offer many benefits to our members, including exclusive access to this recorded webinar and presentation after today's live session. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. In the upper right-hand side of your computer screen, you'll see your control panel. Please note that the webinar is in listen-only mode. Throughout the presentation, you can type a question or a comment in either the question box or in the chat box. Questions will be reviewed at the end of the webinar, and the chat will be monitored throughout the webinar. As I mentioned earlier, today's speaker is Dr. Tony Williams. Tony is a computational chemist at the Center of Computational Toxicology and Exposure, developing the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard. He was the Chief Science Officer for ACD Labs and VP of Strategic Development for the Royal Society of Chemistry. He was the founder of the ChemSpider database, which has about 100,000 users per day. He has authored over 260 papers, book chapters, and books, was recipient of the Jim Gray Award for eScience in 2012, and the American Chemical Society's North Carolina Distinguished Speaker of the Year in 2016. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to this audience. I'm sure we're all appropriately isolating. I know that I am. So the chance to speak to some of you and try and connect you via some of the networking tools I'm going to talk about and some of my efforts over the years to encourage people to use these, I greatly appreciate it. And certainly in this newfound world of webinars and ways to share slides, etc. I'm going to try and show you some of that today and how I've been using it. First thing is on the slide that you can see, there are numerous logos there. I will not have time to cover them all. If I do a hands-on training for some of these tools, it's about 2.5 hours nowadays. I sit in a room with people, they bring their computers, and I show them how to work with these. And I won't be able to touch on all of these because there's so many. But I'm going to show you the ones that I am personally using at this point and how I'm getting benefit out of them. There's one thing about this slide that I'd like to note, and it will become clear the value as we move forward, and that is the top right-hand corner of the slide is something called the ORCID. Now, if we were in a room together, I would ask for a show of hands about how many of you are using an ORCID. Maybe if you've written a paper, the journal has requested your ORCID ID. That is happening increasingly. Maybe you've chosen one for yourself because you have to put it into a grant application. In any case, ORCIDs are proliferating, but generally when I ask the question who in a room has one, there are still people who've never heard of it, don't have one, and I would encourage you to get one. The reason it's on my front slide here and highlighted, sorry, slides are not transitioning, that ORCID is incredibly valuable for indexing and pulling your work together. So that is like a social security number for a scientist. We'll talk more about it, but I want to point out it's right here on the front of the PowerPoint deck, and there is a purpose. Please take as many notes as you see fit. This is also being recorded, and my slides will be made available so you can download them, reuse them, and repurpose them as you see fit. When I give webinars like this, slide decks, I put them online so anybody can use them. And I also encourage you to take my email address and contact me directly. This is something I'm passionate about, something I really want to encourage people to get the best use of. And notice that my name, Anthony, has no H in it. If you send it to williams.anthony with an H, it will go to a person in another office who will scratch their head, not know what it's about. There are various versions of this talk already. I'm going to talk more about slideshare.net, but this particular URL, slideshare.net/Anthony Williams, will take you to over 300 slide decks that I have given, and that grows every week or so as I add more slides. So you will be able to download various versions of this that I've given over the years, and I'll put this one up later. There's also a related publication, and the title of the talk today is based on this publication. This is fairly old at this point. It's a 2017 publication. This is in an open access journal, so free for you to access the PDF file, download it. You can see right here on the front page of this journal article that we have the ID here. That's the ORCID identifier. So when you click on that, it takes you through to my ORCID ID page, and you will be able to see all of the other things that I've done, all my previous presentations, publications get linked up, etc. And we'll dive more into that. But this publication may be of interest to you. It will give you a little more context and a lot more details around the individual applications that are available for you to use. So feel free to look silly at home. Show of hands about whether or not you have an ORCID. I've covered this. How many of you have LinkedIn? I'm going to assume many hands are going up in the air. At this point, people are looking at you wondering why. How many of you have SlideShare? There are less people that use SlideShare than LinkedIn, even though they are directly related, and we'll touch on that. So I'm going to assume some of you have looked at SlideShare decks, but maybe not have put your own up there. And depending on the audience, many of you will have published papers. Some of you will be early career scientists, maybe don't have any yet, maybe something in preparation. The reason I ask that specific question is related to how much work have you done around quote unquote marketing your papers, and who do you expect to do that for you? It's your work. Who do you think is going to be marketing your work for you? And how many of you share your work online? Well, of course, if you have published, if you have given a presentation at a conference, much of your work is already proliferating and being shared online, whether you know it or not. But do you actively participate in sharing your work online? And by work, I mean your code, your data, your presentations, your publications that may simply be reports that won't see light of day as a peer-reviewed publication, but is still a valuable report to share. Why not? And what about that that challenging thing that we have called negative results? How many of you share those? So once upon a time, I was invited to discuss with a writer for Nature about this platform called Kudos. I'm not going to touch on Kudos in any detail today, but Kudos is a platform where you can register your publication that is already out in the public domain for people to read, and then you can add comments to it. So you can talk about the number of, if it happens now, the newspaper that reported on your article, the Twitter postings that happened around your article, the future work that happened as a result of your article. It is literally taking the article that was published and layering on more information to it. It's a very, very valuable system. I use it myself, growkudos.com. But in that interview, there were multiple people who were interviewed. I was one of them. I will show you what I said at the end of this talk. But one of the people was from North Carolina State University. His name is Matt Shipman. I've not met him that I can recall, actually. And he is a research communications lead. And these are his words. And I highlight specifically the truth. It's not the job of a researcher to become an expert in public relations. Of course not. You're a researcher. Why would that be your job? But it is, and it should be, part of your role to toot your own horn, send your own message, contribute to the proliferation of your works around presentations, publications, etc., etc. Because if you don't do it, nobody cares more about your work than you do. And you'd like to shift that. So my hopes for today are that you will participate in this work of sharing your own information. I'm going to give you an overview, just an overview of some of the tools available, give you some stories, stats, and strategies that I've adopted. They're not necessarily the right way to go, but they're the ways that have worked for me, and you should morph them to your own needs. The outcomes I would hope for is that you will claim an ORCID if you don't already have one, or at least walk away knowing what they are, and then ultimately you're going to be asked to provide one if you're publishing, if you're going for a grant. They are growing in stature. I would consider about 2 hours per month on your profile. Many of you might have watched Tiger King on Netflix or have some other favorite streaming show right now. And if you consider how much of your life you throw away to things like Tiger King that you'll never get back, you might want to consider a couple of hours per month on your profile. Spread it out over the 30 days or so. Put it in half an hour once a week. But there's so much benefit to doing this. It's measurable. I've done it. I've helped other people do it, and you will get a return on that investment. And 2 hours per month is not much. It might take a little bit to cross the initial activation barrier to get things moving, but then the benefits will come. And the outcome of that, you will have a bigger impact online, and that can come in many flavors. So let's talk about ORCID. I call it the scientist social security number. Of course, anybody can adopt one, whether you're in the life sciences or social sciences or physical sciences. There's no reason why you can't have a social security number for science. This is mine. Notice my spelling of my name correctly, the Anthony Williams. This is my actual ID. Those 16 digits are right there. If I paste those numbers into a Google search, I will get the return. I told you already that, look, that's showing up on publications. That ID is there. You will see that increasingly on many, many journal articles right now. And then if you click that single URL, orcid.org, it will take you to my entire biography, and I will show you how rich mine is later, because I continue to add to it, and ORCID itself is farming the data around my activities and linking it up. So there have been efforts for publishers to buy into this. This is a fairly old open letter that was put out, and I can tell you there's been a significant shift in how many ORCIDs are out there in the world. And they're actually being issued now by societies. Full countries are registering all of their scientists, et cetera, et cetera. Here I am pasting the 16 digit number into Google to just do a search, and it pulled up a few hundred results. The top one is the ORCID page itself. The second one is my Google Scholar page. I added the ORCID to my Google Scholar page. Many of you will have a Google Scholar profile, I would assume. There is this thing called Academic Karma. Never heard of it, don't use it. It is my page, it's about me. It's got lots of data about me, but I never created it. And the reason being is that the data that goes on ORCID is open data and can be harvested for reuse and repurposing. So many people are using it, including other websites. This is an example. I told you that I use it on my presentations. So if I put it on my presentations and I put my presentations online, then Google will by default index that presentation, grab that ORCID ID off the front page, put it in their database, and all of a sudden all of my online presentations are searchable by ORCID ID. It's a very simplistic approach to doing it. But why not do it on posters? And that's what I do too. So every poster that I produce, my colleagues, whoever is the author, the primary author, the person standing in front of the poster, we encourage them to put their ORCID ID on the poster, generally top right-hand side, in using our EPA templates. And then a PDF file will be produced of that poster. That will be put into our internal systems. They will be indexed then by the search engines. And again, everybody gets advantage now of they can find their works, even when registered through EPA systems and released to the public domain, based on that ORCID ID. There is no place on Google Scholar today yet, and I'm hoping it will come soon, to add your ORCID ID. When I spoke to the Google Scholar people, they said the signal was too low, that there weren't enough ORCIDs for them to include, that it wasn't something they were going to push on. And it's still true. There is still no entry point for that. So I simply added it to my name, and it brings my profile therefore up and visible. So Google indexes all of your works, even if ORCID doesn't. So all of the public presentations that I put on don't necessarily get picked up by ORCID because they're not necessarily in scientific conferences. This presentation is not given at a scientific conference. It's a narrow audience. It's been organized, and thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to do this. But when this goes online later, it will be indexed because it has the ORCID ID on it. And here are some examples. You can see them. These are some of the historical slide decks that are online. And notice what it is. This is the images page of Google, searched based on my ORCID ID. Therefore, all of these show up. One click, people can get through to that information. So let's talk about time and how we invest it. So when you write a paper, unless you're incredibly efficient, and kudos to you if you are, it can be hundreds, if not thousands of hours of research behind a paper. for multiple people. Then you're going to write it. The publisher's going to, going to process it through their systems, etc. And when that publication finally comes out, let's assume it's went through peer review, no issues, so simple, joy for everybody. The question is, how much work do you do then to share with the community at large about that? Because the publisher themselves, having worked for a publisher for 5.5 years, the publisher themselves might do a couple of tweets, maybe. Not every publisher is pushing a tweet out on every article. That's absolutely the truth. So how do you do that? And shouldn't you and your co-authors invest some time in getting it out to the network? And I imagine some of you are doing it. You're saying on LinkedIn, my most recent publication. Maybe on Twitter, you have an account. Maybe on Facebook. So family and friends who are not in science can find out about your publication. That's a possibility. But now you want to network this across a larger group, because a larger group for a publication is how you build the network of interest around your science. It's how you get cited, because people are not going to cite you if they don't know about your article. They're going to measure number of clicks, number of views, number of downloads. That's the new world of modern publishing. Those are the metrics. Those are called alternative metrics, by the way. Views, downloads, not citations. Citations are classical. The alt metrics are the downloads and redistribution, and how many people on Twitter are talking about your article. So I would encourage you that you and your co-authors should do some work of getting it out to the network. And if your co-authors tend not to, it's still your work. You should put the effort in. Now let's talk about a presentation. So this presentation is going to be made today to somewhere around 50 people, we imagine, and it will be recorded. And I'm not sure exactly where it will show up, but let's assume YouTube. So now it's on YouTube, and it might have, you might go back and watch it again. You might share it with some of your friends. So it might go from 50 to 200 or 300 views, and then it will sit there. But if I put work into saying it was a privilege for me to give a presentation online at this day, the YouTube is here, this is what I was talking about, and my network on LinkedIn of a few thousand people and Twitter of a few thousand people, all of a sudden I've expanded the audience. So a small presentation given to a room of people, not a webinar now, but a room of people. I go to conferences all over the world. That could be 200 people in a room. It could also be 20. But you think of the cost, the work that you've done, the science you've done, the time you've taken to write it up, the flight cost, the hotel cost, for you to stand up for 20 to 30 minutes in front of a small group of people. They are the consumers of every minute of that presentation, and nobody else gets to see it. So that's a very, very high cost. My suggestion is put those presentations online. Make sure you have permission from the group that you work with to do that, and share it. And then you can grow a larger audience. But these are not just presentations, right? So we have research data sets we would like people to use and consume. We have software that we build. When we write code, we don't want to be the only ones who use it. We want it to be used for other purposes, reported, cited, consumed, be of high value in the work we do. Of course, publications, presentations. Now, in earlier career scientists probably have electronic theses and dissertations. Share them. Film and audio, share that. Make sure it's available on YouTube, point to it, let people learn what you say. And then this is the caveat, to make sure you are allowed to share. Let's switch to LinkedIn for a moment. This is the most basic career networking tool. And by basic, I don't mean doesn't have lots of functionality. It does. It's gotten better over the years. It's changing quite regularly. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can see these little boxes popping up. This is my profile. I have a lot of connections on here that I've built up over the years. I get a lot of invitations that I prune and accept some and turn down others. But it's a very, very powerful website, and it's certainly the place that HR people who are doing hiring are going to go to. If you're not taking care of your LinkedIn profile, and certainly if you are interviewing with us and I'm on your interview panel, and there's 6 of you, I can tell you I will go to a number of places to harvest information about you. And LinkedIn is one of the ones that I will use. That is true for HR people. So this is a place to make sure that you put information. So a little bit about my primary project. This is an online application. It's a web-based database of 875,000 chemicals. If you've never heard of it, it's called the Comptox Chemicals Dashboard. That's a whole other talk. I'm bringing it up here because I spend a lot of time on this project, so much of my time dedicated here. And so does my center, so does the EPA agency. We have a lot of investment in this, and we want people to know about it. We do about 2 releases a year. Every 6 months, we do an update. So what do I do? So there is the ability on LinkedIn to highlight a project, and I'm allowed to connect to that other people who are involved in the project. I can also associate all the derivative articles that come from that. I need to update this already. We're publishing a lot of articles showing the value. So on this project, I can add ongoing information. When I publish, I can put articles here also. I can also link to my other authors so that people who are listed in the authorship see the publication. And of course, this goes out to my LinkedIn network. Not only my direct connections, but if any of my connections give a thumbs up to my publication, because we live in a world of thumbs up and smiles and emoticons. When that happens, it expands out of my network out to other people's networks. And all of a sudden you have this explosive growth on who's aware of this publication. And I've run experiments seeing how much attention does an article get when I just publish it and let it sit. Then a week later, having seen a certain number of views, a week later, I start using the social networks and I can drive the attention up dramatically. I've got some great success stories about how that can be used. This might be an out-of-date screenshot at this point because LinkedIn is always changing their UI. But in this case, when we did a release in March 2019, I posted this up, and within a day or so, 400 views, three reshares. Some of these people are people I'm directly connected to, and there were a group of other people that I weren't. But they can at least find out about the latest releases. You can also add recommendations. So if you ask to be recommended, make sure it's somebody purposeful. You don't want to be connected to the person who comes and mows your grass. Not that they're an unimportant person who wants to be doing that, but there's no reason to have that on your professional profile. So use the recommendations to build a profile about yourself, who you're connected to, et cetera, et cetera. So those are of high value. You can ask for endorsements too. So in this case, numerous people have made comments about what they believe my skill sets are and where I've contributed. And my skills are deemed to be chemistry, yes, PhD chemist, analytical chemistry, yes. I'm an NMR spectroscopist by training. Drug discovery, nope. I found an aspirin in my kitchen this morning, but that's not the form of drug discovery I'm deemed to be. I've never worked in a pharma company, but I have written in drug discovery journals. So that's probably what they're connecting me to. And I'm willing to leave that there. NMR, science, chem, informatics. So all of those are good. You can control the endorsements so that you can have people see what you're willing to be touted as. And if, as I like to say, if 6 people say you're a horse, saddle up. So according to this, I am somebody that you should be talked to about drug discovery. And I would clarify that conversation about, yeah, this is my involvement. I build software tools. They can be used by drug discovery. Putting all of this work into the LinkedIn profile, you then have the ability to save a PDF file. So now when people ask me for a general overview of my skill sets, I can point them to my blog. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I also can point them to the PD. I can send them a PDF file on any given day, one button click, and you get this rich PDF file. And it can be overwhelming depending on how much work you put into LinkedIn. The PDF file now is 50 pages, and that is too much for some, and it's exactly what they like to see for others. So it's easy, but it's easy to do. It's one click. LinkedIn, top left-hand corner, you can see the LinkedIn logo. Own SlideShare. By the way, LinkedIn is now owned by Microsoft. It was purchased for billions of dollars. But LinkedIn acquired SlideShare because they saw that professionals were putting a lot of their works online, and they wanted to connect the works that came through presentation style, public, and also manuscripts and reports, all can be held in SlideShare, and they wanted to connect it to the profile online because professionals are doing a lot of this public presentation. This is out of date, but you can see on, just to the right of my photograph, 358 slide shares, 268 followers, 1 clipboard. This is out of date. It's grown significantly. It's probably approaching 400 slide shares now. You can download my presentation and reuse it as you see fit. You can license it in different ways, etc., etc. And believe me, when you have built a following, when you have a profile, when you've worked on your social networks so that you can share, as you put a presentation up, you can share it with people, then you gain the benefits of that. So I mentioned, I give a presentation in a room of 20 people. I put it up here, and within a week, it could be 1,000 people have seen it. I have examples where before a presentation, I gave this presentation at the Howard Hughes Institute up north near DC, Virginia, and I said, let's run the experiment. I'm going to post the presentation I'm giving you in this moment in front of you. I'm going to post it to SlideShare, and I'm going to use Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to make people aware of it, and I'm going to see with you within an hour how many people have looked at it. My recollection is the experiment showed 280 views in an hour. That's the type of result you can get when you actively share. And you can see here some of my presentations. The second one along mobilizing chemistry, this was putting thousands of chemicals on an app, says 24,000 views. So, you know, a lot of views of these. So I use this on an ongoing basis, put all of my slide decks up. Analytics, you can then look at the activity on your account. So in this case, in 1 month from March 26th, 2019 to April 25th, 3,000 views and 9 slide share actions would almost certainly mean downloads. So 3,000 views, and this shows you the top views. What are the presentations I'm giving that have the most interest? Before I joined EPA, I was much more active in the social networks. Now working for a government agency, I have to be more cautious. I can only share stuff that is actually approved and is in our systems and is allowed to go out publicly. So this is cleared, so no problem. Many other things I have to be a little more cautious of how I share things. Again, if you're going to share, the caveat is make sure you're allowed to. So these views used to be higher pre-EPA, but there's an example. So the top views is the identification of unknowns using mass spectrometry. And in 1 year, so these are stats from 2015, 2016, 84,000 views. I think I peaked at over 100,000 views a year. And there's no way, of course, I'm presenting to 100,000 people. I can't give that many talks in that many venues. So it's good traffic if you built your network. And SlideShare is not just slide decks, but these are PDF files. So when I get open access articles, I ensure that I load those up in here for people to see also. We also use Figshare inside EPA. We are licensed users of Figshare. This is a site, many of you may be loading your supplementary info files here already. You can follow our account and you can see all of our slide decks. So the slide decks not only go to SlideShare, not only indexed by Google, but we also put copies of them here. I don't do this work. This is done by the office personnel who ensure that we are putting everything in one place, not just Tony's work, but also all of my colleagues' work. So Chris Grolke, Richard Judson, et cetera, et cetera. So all of our work, all of our presentations, all of our posters, so the bottom left-hand corner is a poster, goes here. But because I put my ORCID ID on it, I can find every instance of every presentation and poster I've ever given simply by pasting in my ORCID ID. Not all of my colleagues do that. Not all of my colleagues necessarily have an ORCID, but I am teaching as many postdocs as possible to make use of this approach. And as I said, posters also, so that's my poster. So DOI everything you can. You DOI your articles, that gets done by the publisher. When we put data sets up on Figshare, we get a DOI for them. We reference that DOI in our journal article. We can store multiple versions, and then the journal article responds directly to this DOI and links up. So we have permanency. I've also chosen to do this. A list of every publication is available as a Google Sheet, freely available to anybody in the world. Notice it's got the list of my publications. My ORCID ID is written right there. And if anyone wants to see the latest and greatest things from me, they have multiple places. I do it here because it's easy for me to download this in an Excel spreadsheet. And notice there are 3 tabs on the bottom: publications, presentations, datasets. You might think this is a massive investment in time, and the true answer is to try and pull together 260 publications, book chapters, books was about a week's work in the evening for me to do this. I do it once. Now I add everything to this as it comes out. Presentations and data sets, I went back only a couple of years. I also use ResearchGate. Some people say they get too many emails from ResearchGate, they won't use it. My suggestion is use the control and the settings to make sure you don't get too many emails. This is a very good site. I use it regularly. It shows you my affiliation, right-hand side. US EPA shows you who I work for and with. Rusty Thomas is the center director, and then my lab members. This has grown since then. More people do it. Here you can add articles, books, chapters, code, patents, and look at that thing in the middle called negative results and raw data. It's a great way to put all of your data up. Going back to my project, the Comtox Chemicals Dashboard, here we will publish everything again about releases and new publications, data sets, etc. So people following me on ResearchGate get that information. So here's me pushing out an update on March 2019. Here's adding links to publications. So again, it's very much a similar site to ORCID in some ways, but it's a different user base. So I get the best of both worlds. Here you can see some of the stats. So 33,000 reads. This is out of date. It's more like 45,000 at this point. You can see the project reads, recommendations, etc., etc. So, and occasionally you get a nice email that says, with this number of downloads, you were the most downloaded researcher. I don't recall being downloaded personally. I'm sure they went for my work instead of me. You would not want me in your house. Prompts to improve your profile. It also encourages you. It finds things about you. It's using your ORCID ID. It's using your name. It's using artificial intelligence to say, this might be your article. Would you like to add it? Which is great. And I appreciate them for doing that. Again, if you think you get too many emails, please switch them off. There's total control for that. And I get very few emails. There's an alternative to ResearchGate called Academia.edu. I tried this out for a while. I am limited in time. Single dad, 60, 70-hour work week. Many of us work really long hours. I'm sure you do too. You need to choose where to put your time. This is one alternative that you could look at. I like it, but at this point, even though I like it, I don't have time to put everything on ResearchGate and Figshare and Academia. So I only update this every few months. I'll just take an evening and put everything here. But because I used it and put some effort into sharing my information from here, you can see the statistics, top right-hand corner. So it was in the top 0.5% of all scientists on Academia.edu. Because I pushed things through Twitter, there were 22,000 views, 850 followers. Again, I expanded a network. It is different than what I have on ResearchGate. It's different than what I have on the other profiles. And all I do is get advantage of sharing my information with a different audience. So we talked about presentations and publications, but on Figshare, we also do this data sharing. You can do this on ResearchGate also. And here we have some example files. So the profiling 58 compounds, top left-hand corner, that data set gets uploaded, gets DOI'd, people can download it and use it. You can then see how much your data is used. So that little blue donut I'll talk about shortly, that's an altmetric score that comes from altmetric.com. You can see a description of what the data set is. You can see 203 views of that data set and 34 downloads. I think that was in about a week of the article up, which you can see the link to the article at the bottom right. So that's the reference. So put your tags on here, put this up. Now this is the EPA site for Figshare. However, Figshare is free for personal usage. So I've been using it for a number of years. I think I was one of the first ones on in a few months. And You can see a description of me, my ORCID ID. Notice the ID shows up pretty automatically. I link it up. You can follow me here. You can see where I work. You can see my description. You can see my co-workers and collaborators. Everything I put on Figshare, my collaborators are made aware of. My co-workers are made aware of. My followers are made aware of. I'm building the network and sharing my work with them. And you can see the results on the top. So this is old. This is at least a year old. 128,000 views of what I put up here. 26,500 downloads and 10 citations, 2 data sets on Figshare. That will have grown significantly. I need to update the slide. So now we talk about people who review papers, and I'm sure there are a number of people on here who do. What do you do to get any credits at all for the work you do for reviewing? Maybe you don't care. I actually would like people to know that I review. I think it's important if I'm going for a job for people to know that I do review, the caliber of the journals that I review for, how much do I review? I could sit in an interview and say, oh yeah, I review regularly. And regularly is once every 6 months on a regular basis, 1 paper every 6 months. That's not really a firm representation of my contributions to reviewing papers. So Publons is a site where you get to put up the statistics of how much you're reviewing. You can register here every review that you do, pointed to the journal itself. You can even register the actual review if you wish. Submit it. It can be made private or public. Some journals now like you to have open peer review. I open peer review, I use this site. There's another one called Reviewer Credits. You have to choose which one you want to use. So here I am logging into Publons. Notice that already ORCID is showing up as a core identifier. You can log into Publons with LinkedIn, ORCID, or Google, and normally the other one is Facebook, of course. So here you can use this to log in. So I log in with my ORCID ID. This is my public review record. So I started using it in earnest at the end of 2016. I was able to find some of my earlier reviews, but not all of them. I'm not that good at my account keeping, I'm afraid. But then everything that I put in since then gets registered. You can see the metrics of where I review also. So these are the journals that I'm reviewing in. You can see the counts here. Every time I review, it's this simple. I get an acceptance email from the journal, and I forward that to an email address called reviews@publons.com. And it has in there, it has a hyperlink that you generate on the Publons site. It's 30 seconds for me to get my review up and online. It's very simple. Maybe a couple of minutes if I want to include the full text. So Publons is very beneficial. You put that also hooks up to LinkedIn. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, you can have a Publons connection to it. People can see that you're a Publons reviewer and you can navigate to their page. Now let's talk a little bit more about these alt metrics. I talked about the donuts. We have views, downloads, citations, all of these things. So the classical metrics are, where do you publish, how many articles, and how many times you cite? And we know that review articles are going to get you more. And at this point, we know open access will get you more views. There's a lot of statistics around this at this point. But what about when somebody is talking about your article on Twitter? That is not a citation, but if there's a conversation that goes on with 1,000 people engaged in a discussion around your article, that's 1,000 plus tweets, different people contributing to the overall impact of your article. Your article has created a conversation. That may be a good or bad conversation, by the way. Impact is literally measures, not necessarily quality of article, just measures of discussions. Peer review is something you do. So you're also having an impact there. There's no reason that shouldn't be included as part of your impact metric. And then the downloads, views as we stored. But on the right-hand side, you see storage, what files are you storing online for people to look to get, what links are you creating to other works, what bookmarks have you got, so that you're contributing to other people's alt metrics. There is an entire manifesto about this, bottom right-hand corner, altmetrics.org, worth reading. There are free tools that you can use. In this case, this is Impact Story, and I just noticed the ORCID is at the end of the Impact Story URL. This will show you my activity. It shows you some achievements. Badges are cool. You know, they're great. They're part of the modern world about if you drink IPAs and I use my beer app, it will tell me how many IPAs I've had across the country. Badges are fun. But this tells me, you know, I'm in the top 25% of all people doing open access. 92% of my research is free. I'm mentioned on Wikipedia, blah, 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 blah. So this is the interface, but it will only handle the latest 100 of your publications. You can't add more than that at present. There may be a way to do that if you pay a fee. I don't. I use the free version. It shows you also under each article, it will show you LinkedIn, Facebook, Google+, Mendeley, Twitter, 277 mentions of the first article, open drug discovery for the Zika virus, and it was discussed on all those platforms. And you can click on those and you can see what those discussions were. It tells you where it's been saved, 75, 73 on Mendeley, and on and on and on. You can see all of the activity on the right-hand corner for a particular journal article that we put live on +1. These are altmetric scores. These donuts show up on multiple publications right now, and they are integrating news outlet data, blog posts, Google Plus comments, but Google Plus is pretty much evaporated, of course. I taught my postdoc to use this, and what we said was put your journal article up, and as soon as it's spread it across the network, please, so that you can see the results. And the results were very, very good. In just a few days, he had 66 shares of his postings, 774 downloads, and in our center, this was the top article for that month, I believe, because he put the work into it. So you reap the benefits. It does not make it a good article, just to clarify. It just means it's been viewed and downloaded. But you can look at the details of who's tweeting about it. There was a movie made about it. This is Google Scholar. I've told you about this already. I use this a lot. I encourage you to prune. The articles that show up. So as an example, I get noise. People put things against my profile because Anthony Williams is fairly common. All of these articles in front of you have got A. Williams involved. There is one at the bottom on the right-hand corner called Miscellanies in Prose and Verse, 1766. I'd have to be pretty good to be writing in those days, and I wasn't. So how Google's algorithms think that I would be over 200 years old still confuses me. The way I noticed these articles were showing up is I know none of these co-authors on the left-hand side, so you have to prune. It's very easy. You go in, you click on the article and delete it from your profile. So I encourage you to watch your profile. And you can also add articles that are missed so you can maintain your profile and get the latest and greatest in there. Google is excellent at finding articles associated with you. It's not perfect. None of these systems are. They will give you wrong articles. They will miss good articles. I do use Twitter. I was one of the people who said that 140 characters was just plain stupid. Who would care? Why would you do that? How wrong I was. We can swing entire markets right now on single tweets and drive stock prices up, down, and all over the place. So Twitter has power for sure. The greatest value for me, it's no longer 140 characters, is to lead people to my other works. Put it on SlideShare, let people know. Put it on LinkedIn, let people know. Put things on YouTube, let people know. And you can get tens of thousands of impressions in a week. So 36,000 impressions over 1 week regarding the work I was posting online. You're amplifying your work and making it available to people. I've proven that I can take old articles that were published 20 years ago. I'm fairly old at this point, and I have papers from the late 80s, and I want to wake them back up because I think they're important. I can do that. I can put them directly on Twitter, and suddenly I'm driving the altmetrics up, and downloads are going up, etc., etc. I write a lot of book chapters and books, 6 books for 40, 50 book chapters. So I claimed a page on Amazon for free, and I put up my book chapters linked in there, and all my tweets flow directly in there. and it connects to movies when I want to add them, things like that. So I'm taking advantage of Amazon to share all that information. They're allowing me to do this because they want to sell more books. Facebook is for family and friends. You know, this is where I do COVID-19 karaoke songs. If anyone wants to know, send me an email. I share blog posts here, links to my papers, and I'm doing this in a very simplistic way. I simply put it up on SlideShare and I paste it onto my Facebook profile. I do have many friends who are scientists, and my mom still has no idea what I do. So she can look at it too and say, explain that to me. And a great conversation ensues. So this is an example of uploading that. It is shown directly in Facebook as a SlideShare presentation. When this is looked at, it adds to the views on SlideShare, drives up the numbers there, all contribute to alt metrics. I chose to brand myself early on as a connector. So I read Malcolm Gladwell's book on the tipping point, and I recognized myself very quickly as a connector. So I see myself as connecting science, data, publications, presentations, data sets, code, cheminformatics. That's my job. I connect people with all of that, and I try to do it as best I can. This is one example of connecting you to systems. So my blog is chemconnector.com. I used to be very active on it, but now because I work for a government agency, I have to use it very cautiously. But I do take public information, my slide deck, my title, the abstract, which is cleared. And notice on this page now, I have the abstract cleared by EPA, public domain. I have underneath it a link with a DOI to the version of this on Figshare, so that people, if they're Figshare users, can find it there. And below that, I have an embedded version of the slide deck on SlideShare, which is one line of embed code pasted into the blog. And you can go find my CV on here, my presentations, publications, all there. This is the top of my CV. So I can't tell you everything I do very easily. I cannot put it on a couple of pages. So the top of my CV is an entire set of URLs at this point. You want to learn, you actually want to learn about me, please check out those profiles and you will learn. Publons will give you my reviewing activities. My Amazon author page will take you to book chapters, etc., etc. So I want to leave 10 minutes for questions. So what next? It's like drinking from a fire hose. There is so much to do. There are so many sites to use. There are so many possibilities that will consume your time and you might feel like you're diving down a rabbit hole. So my recommendations are very minimal, really. If you don't have an ORCID ID, register for one. And if, by the way, if you do have one, you might want to check that all of your works have transferred to it, all your publications, things that you feel should be connected. Make sure that your employment profile is complete. I would enhance your LinkedIn profile, especially if you're a junior career scientist and you're looking to be hired. And it's true for any of us at call. As we move on, we would like to have a complete profile to represent what we've been doing for the past few years. Curate your Google Scholar citation profile if you have one. Choose ResearchGate or Academia and use Publons. Now that still may seem like a lot, but believe me, once you get this under control, it's a couple of hours a month. I would encourage you to participate in your profile. It's yours. You're being profiled on the internet, whether you want to or not, if you are contributing to manuscripts, publications, etc. So you may as well do it right. And then this is what I said in that nature.com interview regarding kudos. And I summarized this right at the end. Choose 2 or 3 social media platforms, 2 hours a month. If nothing else, get LinkedIn as an online CV, get your ORCID ID and log your peer review activities on Publons. And make sure that you get the message out to relevant people. Use those systems, use those sites, and spread your own message, toot your own horn, because you're the one who should be doing it well. Nobody else, truly, sadly, nobody else is going to do the work that you can do around your profile. There are various versions of this talk available, as I said. I'm going to leave this slide up. It is the final slide, and I'm going to open up for questions and turn it over to the hosts.
All right, thank you, Dr. Williams, for a very informative presentation. So Please type your questions in the question box, and Tony will be more than happy to answer them. Okay, we actually have a question up here already, Tony. So the question is, can you equate the audience when giving a presentation to the audience online when you don't know how many online actually took in the whole presentation?
Let me see if I understand the question. Can I give the presentation not truly knowing how many people are online? And oh, maybe it's different. Can I ask the question again so I make sure I get this? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm actually not 100% certain this is the right word. Let's see. Can you equate the audience when giving a presentation to the audience online when you don't know how many online actually took in the whole presentation?
Okay, so I'll disentangle one line. When I give a presentation to a room of 200 people, I have no idea any longer how many people are taking it in. So many people keep their heads down in their phone or computer. That could be an insult. They're ignoring me. It could be that they're typing things. In this case, I have no idea how many people are listening, taking it in. I know for myself, working at home is very distracting because there's so many things going on. It's really hard to say how well my message goes across. It's not what I say; it's actually what you hear. Standard, human condition. But I believe by having this recorded, if you were distracted, the opportunity now is that this can be watched over and over again. And I've offered myself up for further discussion and engagement. I'm not sure that answered the question, but I'm not quite certain I understood the question.
I agree. I'm not quite sure the question is clear. If the person who asked the question is still with us, if they can type a clarification, we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Other questions? We'll give people a second to think through their questions.
Okay.
Any questions out there, folks? All right. Well, I don't see anyone typing, so maybe people are thinking.
No, I don't see anything coming through.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll say thank you to Tony, and thank you all for participating in this month's webinar. Please be reminded that in the next day or so, all participants will receive an email from ISES that will ask you to evaluate your participation and your experiences today with this webinar. Please take a minute to provide your feedback. The recording for today's webinar will be posted behind the member shield on the ISES website, along with the handouts, so along with the slides. And my last reminder is that the ISES 2020 meeting is officially going virtual. The abstract submission deadline has been extended to June 18th, 2020. So please visit the meeting website for more information. With that, I'll thank you for participating today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.